The Anomaly, Tensura X Data Live, by Nocturne_Chapter 43, Astral Eclipse. Shidhu Pav. A single flick of Mio's fingers and Shidhu vanished. The battlefield disappeared in an instant, replaced by the dim, artificial lighting of an underground shelter. Before he could even process what had happened, he found himself colliding with something soft. Or rather, someone. A sharp yelp filled the shelter as Yamabuki eyes struggled beneath him. "Shido, you absolute pervert," she shrieked, shoving him off. "Even in a crisis, you still managed to land on me. What kind of talent is this?" "Seriously, dude," Hazakura Mai sighed, shaking her head. "At least try to pick a better moment to be questionable. That's so lame." Fujibakama Mi said nonchalantly. Shidhu quickly scrambled to his feet, brushing off the dust. "Sorry about that, but there's no time for this." As Ai and her friends continued their complaints, Hiroto Tanamachi, the only one not joining in the teasing, stepped forward. "Wait, are you trying to leave?" Hiroto frowned, watching as Shidhu took a deep breath, his focus sharpening. Without another word, Michael manifested in his grasp, its golden key shimmering with ethereal light. Everyone in the shelter froze. What the hell?" I blinked. "How are you even doing that?" Mai gawked. Ignoring their shock, Shidhu turned the key midair, twisting reality itself to form a portal. With one last glance at them, he stepped through. The battlefield greeted him with chaos. Shidhu ran. His legs burned, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he kept pushing forward. He had to reach Mio. Then an uncountable number of light particles filled the sky. They shimmered, spiraling across the war-torn landscape like drifting embers, except they weren't simply floating, they were consuming everything in their path. Bandersnatch units disintegrated on contact. The Dem fleet crumbled, several Est wizards incapacitated before they could even react. Shidhu's eyes widened. What is this?" he muttered, stunned. The sheer scale of destruction overwhelmed his senses. But there was no time to dwell on it, he kept running. All around him, Dem warships were falling from the sky. One crashed in the distance, sending out a violent shockwave. Another spiraled downward, shattering into debris midair. Smoke. Fire. Intense winds. He couldn't even see ahead properly, the sheer destruction clouding his vision. "I hope there's still time," he whispered, gritting his teeth. Then boom. A massive Dem warship crashed directly in front of him. Shidhu instinctively shielded himself, squeezing his eyes shut as the explosion rocked the earth. The sound of destruction was everywhere. When he opened his eyes again, he could only whisper in disbelief. What happened? What the hell is going on? His heart pounded in his chest, but before he could take another step, a portal opened beside him. A hand grabbed his wrist and yanked him inside. When he landed, he found himself surrounded by familiar faces. Toka, Mana, Yoshino, Origami. All of them were tense, their expressions grim. Shidhu's eyes darted around, searching for two more figures. Kagaya and Yuzuru. He breathed. "Where are they?" Toka's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She didn't need to say anything. The look in her eyes was enough. Shidhu felt his breath hitch. His stomach twisted. No. Gone. Killed by Mio. The weight of those words threatened to crush him, but before he could even process it, Takamiya Mio stood before them. From the corner of his eye, he saw Mana tense. "Is that the spirit of origin?" she muttered, scowling. "Gosh, I hate seeing things that worsen my mood." Mio, however, barely seemed fazed. Instead, her gaze softened slightly. "Shin," she murmured. "You're here already? Why didn't you stay back there?" Her tone carried an odd sense of disappointment. Then, she turned to Mana. "It's been a while, Mana." Mana stiffened. Her breath hitched. She had never met Mio before. And yet Mio spoke her name as if recalling an old acquaintance. Before anyone could question it, Mio continued. "I have to retrieve the Saphira now," she said, her voice serene. "But I assure you I won't kill you both, or Shin." Her eyes darkened. "So stay away from here." A tense silence fell over the battlefield. Shidhu clenched his fists. They couldn't retreat. They needed to find Rimuru, but at this point, it was impossible. Everything felt orchestrated. Every path led them back to Mio. And now they had no choice. They had to end this fight. Now. Then Mio extended her hand. A second angel manifested. Ein Sof. A colossal, mystical tree erupted from the ground, its massive trunk adorned with a statue of a girl embedded deep within. Its branches, decorated with radiant flowers, pierced the sky itself, reshaping the battlefield in an instant. The ground beneath them transformed. The world became monochrome. A checkerboard-like domain spread outward, trapping them within. Shidu barely had time to react before he realized. They were in Mio's domain now, and there was no escape. Westcott Pav. The battlefield hung in silence. The smoke was beginning to clear, the rubble settling, yet Westcott already knew it wasn't over. 90% of him believed Rimuru had survived the Helkerhund-type blast. But 10% considered the possibility that she was gone. That sliver of doubt shattered in an instant. As the last wisps of smoke faded, a lone figure stood amidst the ruins. Not broken, not weakened, but stronger, and she was different. Her limited astral dress was gone. In its place, her true astral dress shimmered, a manifestation of unrestricted power. A transformation that meant only one thing: she was ready to kill them. Westcott was not surprised, he expected this. From the sky, Ellen's voice rang out. It's as you said, Ike. She really went and broke her seal. The path between her and Itsuka Shidu is completely shattered now, she observed, her crimson eyes narrowing as she analyzed Rimuru's form. Westcott merely chuckled, adjusting his gloves with practiced ease. Yes, we already predicted this moment, he replied smoothly. Don't let it shake you, we continue as planned. Of course, Ellen acknowledged without hesitation. Then, Artemisia scoffed, shaking her head. HMPH. And here I thought spirits were predictable, she mused, her sharp eyes never leaving Rimuru. But this one makes even the impossible feel mundane. Her fingers tightened around her weapon, it's almost insulting. Rimuru lifted her hand. A pulse of energy vibrated through the air. Then her angel manifested. In that instant, everything changed. Tension coiled like a wire drawn too tight. They all knew what was coming. Westcott exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the ground-bound spirit below. Prepare yourselves, he ordered, and then the sky shattered. A flicker. A blur. A streak of death. Rimuru vanished. Before Westcott could react, before even a thought could form, reality itself cracked apart. A piercing shockwave split the heavens as Rimuru tore through space, faster than thought, faster than reaction. A devastating impact exploded outward. Her blade clashed against Beelzebub's barrier. The force tore apart the clouds, carving a deep chasm into the sky itself. Then she was gone again. A second impact. Then a third. Westcott's mind raced to keep up. Not speed. This was something else. Rimuru was beyond the concept of velocity. She was erasing the distance between them. Beelzebub. The Nibelcoal swarmed, reacting to Rimuru's assault, forming countless layers of defensive barriers. But crack. A single slash fractured reality itself, nearly shattering the defense. A near miss. Rimuru blurred back, reversing her acceleration midair. She kicked off nothingness itself, twisting at an impossible angle. And then she struck again. Boom. Westcott barely had time to raise Beelzebub. A fraction of a second later a second shockwave detonated. The pressure alone sent Ellen and Artemisia skidding backward. Artemisia's grip tightened around her sword. This is ridiculous, I can't even see her movements. Westcott narrowed his eyes. Not even he could fully track her. But he didn't need to, because Beelzebub was absolute. It blocked what already existed. It was a perfect countermeasure. But then, Rimuru spoke. Your Beelzebub is pretty useful, huh? Her voice was calm, almost mocking. But you're forgetting something. A glint in her golden eyes. It can only block an attack that already exists. Her smirk widened. So all I had to do, she threw her katana away, is create a new one. Westcott's pupils contracted. Wait! A blinding light exploded above him. Rimuru had already moved. A crushing force slammed into his chest. Rimuru's dropkick landed. Fane's kick version. The impact was catastrophic. A rippling shockwave burst from the point of contact, disintegrating dozens of Nibelcoal units instantly. For the first time Westcott was hit. A split second later. A beam of pure light energy followed through, amplifying the damage tenfold. Westcott plummeted. His mind reeled, his body screamed in protest, but at the last possible moment he activated his territory. The force of Rimuru's kick was partially absorbed, and before he could be obliterated entirely, he sacrificed an entire wave of Nibelcoal units as shields. The drones were destroyed instantly, but Westcott remained, barely. He coughed, stabilizing himself mid-air. His body ached. He had taken damage, real damage. His mind churned. That attack, it wasn't just raw speed, it wasn't just physical strength. Rimuru had infused Riryoku into her legs, a new attack. That was how she had bypassed Beelzebub. Back on the ground, Rimuru dusted off her astral dress, tilting her head. Then she smirked. Oh, she mused, it actually worked. She tapped her chin, mocking contemplation. But, looks like it wasn't enough to finish you off in one blow. She exhaled through her nose, cracking her knuckles. That's too bad. Then, her smirk widened. I guess that just means I have to come up with something else. Rimuru pawed. The air felt thick, charged with invisible pressure. Rimuru stood on the ground, her golden eyes gleaming with unrestrained energy. Above, Westcott, Ellen, Artemisia, and the Nibelcoal hovered like vultures, high, distant, and full of arrogance. Their presence was oppressive, yet, to Rimuru, they were insignificant. Her fingers flexed over the hilt of her katana before she loosened her grip entirely. Rolling her shoulders, she let out a slow breath, her lips curling into a smirk. Let's see how fast you can really keep up, she muttered. Then she moved. Reality twisted. The moment Rimuru took her first step, the battlefield shattered into fragments of perception. To an outsider, it looked as if she had simply vanished. But in that instant she had already moved. Westcott's instincts flared. His eyes darted, but before he could process the change. Boom! A thunderous explosion ruptured the battlefield. The sheer acceleration of her movement detonated the air itself, sending shockwaves across the ruined landscape. The force tore through the ground, obliterating debris, warping the very fabric of space. Westcott barely had time to raise Beelzebub. His barriers flared to life, reacting purely on instinct. But Rimuru wasn't there. Above, Ellen's sharp eyes flicked left, right, desperately tracking a ghost. Another impact. Then another. Boom, boom, boom. Each time Rimuru reappeared, it was for a mere fraction of a second. Her foot would touch space only for her to kick off it. She would twist mid-air, reversing her velocity in an instant, bending the laws of inertia and physics. She wasn't just fast. She was accelerating endlessly. She was disappearing constantly. Even the concept of distance couldn't catch up. Westcott's mind was a machine of calculation. He had fought powerful spirits. He had seen impossible abilities. But this wasn't teleportation. This wasn't simple speed. Rimuru was erasing the time between each movement. She was moving faster than the world itself could comprehend. Then, suddenly she spoke. Your Beelzebub is pretty useful, huh? Her voice was everywhere. Mocking, calm, confident. But you're forgetting something. A golden glint. Westcott spotted her. She was right above him. Her smirk deepened. It can only block an attack that already exists. Westcott's stomach dropped. Her hand let go of her katana. She threw it away. A new attack. Wait. A blinding explosion of light erupted above him. Rimuru had already moved. Westcott barely had time to react. A crushing force slammed into his chest. Rimuru's dropkick landed. Fane's kick version. The impact was catastrophic. A rippling shockwave burst outward, annihilating the sky itself. The sheer force of her strike vaporized dozens of Nibelcoal units instantly. For the first time Westcott was hit. A second later, a beam of pure light energy erupted from Rimuru's kick, amplifying the force tenfold. Westcott plummeted. The world blurred past him. His chest screamed in pain. His vision flickered. But at the last possible moment he activated his territory. The remainder of Rimuru's attack was partially absorbed, but the impact was still too great. He sacrificed an entire wave of Nibelcoal drones as shields. They were obliterated instantly, but he survived. Rimuru landed, exhaling through her nose. Her eyes flickered back toward Westcott's battered figure. She tilted her head slightly, golden eyes narrowing in thought. There. She had made a small mistake. Her brow furrowed for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a smirk. She hadn't infused enough Riryoku into her legs. And she hadn't concentrated it on a single point. The damage was spread out. It should have been a focused strike enough to shatter Beelzebub's defenses entirely. Instead, she had let some of the energy bleed away. She clicked her tongue mentally. TCH, sloppy, but hey. Her gaze returned to Westcott, amusement flickering in her eyes. I still landed the first hit, didn't I? Out loud, she smirked, her voice light with amusement. Oh, she tapped her chin, feigning contemplation. It actually worked. She let out a small chuckle. But, looks like it wasn't enough to finish you off in one blow. A small exhale. Then she cracked her knuckles. That's too bad. Then, her smirk widened, her golden eyes gleamed. I guess that just means, she rolled her shoulders. I'll have to come up with something else. Blades clashed. Explosions roared. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning debris. Rimuru zigzagged through the battlefield like a phantom, her movements fluid and unpredictable. Westcott, Ellen, Artemisia, and the Nibelcole army relentlessly pursued her, their combined attacks tearing through the sky. Despite the overwhelming odds, she smirked. Rimuru-sama. Ciel's ever-calm voice chimed in her mind, completely unfazed by the chaos. Oh, is it already done? Rimuru asked, weaving through a barrage of projectiles, her tone almost casual as she dodged another incoming strike. Not yet. Ciel responded smoothly. For now, keep moving as you please. You're rather difficult to hit anyway. Rimuru scoffed, twisting midair to avoid Ellen's sword before countering with a burst of energy from her fingertips. Oh, so I'm just stalling now? Great. Love being reduced to a distraction. Incorrect. You are maintaining optimal battle flow. It is an important role. That's just a fancy way of saying distraction, and I don't appreciate it. Would you rather be an ineffective distraction? Rimuru rolled her eyes. How about not being a distraction at all? Noted. But since you failed to execute the Riryoku-infused kick properly, it is best that I handle it next time. Rimuru froze mid-step. Excuse me. You heard me, Rimuru-sama. Your energy control was lacking. Your output was inconsistent, leading to unnecessary energy dispersion. In layman's terms, you wasted power. Rimuru clenched her fists, barely suppressing the urge to punch the air in frustration. Shut up. You didn't need to blurt that out, you know? Would you rather I quietly let you make another inefficient attack? Yes. Wait, no, that's not the point, Ciel continued, unfazed. You insisted on doing it without my assistance. I simply let you try. Rimuru groaned, dodging another barrage of attacks. Yeah, I get it. I sucked at it, thanks for the reminder. Acknowledged. Since you have admitted to your failure, shall I take over for the next attempt? Rimuru gritted her teeth, barely avoiding another strike. Fine. But don't get cocky. I do not experience arrogance, only efficiency. Oh, now you're just rubbing it in. Just as Rimuru prepared to launch another attack, something changed. The moment her foot touched the ground, a pink glow ignited beneath her. Her instincts screamed. Boom! Rimuru barely managed to propel herself away as the ground erupted in a violent explosion, the shockwave nearly throwing her off balance. Her eyes widened in shock. That wasn't Riryoku. That wasn't Beelzebub. That was magic. She quickly turned her gaze toward Westcott, who stood in the sky with an eerie smile. He wasn't using his usual abilities. He was using actual magic. Rimuru narrowed her eyes. Ciel. Analyze that attack just now. Understood. I will begin immediate analysis. Her smirk faded. This fight was about to take a whole new turn. The battlefield was pure chaos. Rimuru weaved through the onslaught, her body a blur of motion as pink glowing explosions erupted all around her. Each step had to be precise. Each movement calculated. The slightest hesitation would mean death. Boom! Another blast detonated at her heels, forcing her into a mid-air flip. A streak of silver shot toward her Ellen's blade, gleaming under the fractured sky. Rimuru twisted her body, narrowly avoiding the lethal arc. Before she could counter, the air around her rippled. She snapped her head up. A massive fireball loomed in the sky, burning with unnatural intensity, hurling straight toward her. At the same time, dozens of floating book pages Nibelcoal constructs began swarming her, each one inscribed with complex sigils, glowing ominously as they unleashed beams of energy in a relentless barrage. Rimuru gritted her teeth. TCH persistent. Her body flickered, darting through the aerial minefield, dodging energy blasts, slipping between the Nibelcoal constructs as the fireball continued its descent. Then Ciel's voice rang out. Rimuru-sama. I have analyzed it. Perfect timing. Mind explaining why the hell he can use magic now? Rimuru muttered, sidestepping another explosion just as Ellen's blade cut through the space she had occupied a millisecond before. Isaac Westcott is a magus. A being naturally capable of manipulating the flow of mana in this world. Rimuru narrowed her eyes, flicking a stray energy blast away with a casual swipe of her hand. So he's not just using Riryoku and realizers. He can actually wield magic at its purest form. Correct. It seems they used the spirit of origin to create the realizers and territory, integrating them into this world to enhance their magic. However, the exact process remains unknown. Rimuru clicked her tongue. Figures. The fireball finally crashed down. Boom. Flames engulfed the battlefield. Smoke exploded outward, swallowing everything. For a moment, everything was silent. Then two figures dashed out of the smoke, two Rimurus. Ellen didn't hesitate. She lunged at one of them, blade poised for a decisive strike. But her sword stopped. A barrier blocked her path. Her eyes widened as she pushed against it. Something was off. This barrier, she thought. It feels like Riryoku, but at the same time, it's not. Then, she saw it. The Rimuru in front of her. Her eyes crimson red. This wasn't Rimuru, this was Ciel. Before Ellen could react, a presence flickered beside her. The real Rimuru. A smirk tugged at her lips, and just like that the final standoff began. Rimuru's golden eyes flicked towards Ciel, but she continued speaking telepathically. Rimuru-sama. The preparation you asked for is complete. All that remains is activation. Ciel's voice carried a composed certainty, unwavering even in the chaos of battle. Rimuru's lips curled into a grin. Ooh, finally wait, do you really need to come out now? Ciel did not hesitate. Yes. No explanation, no justification. Rimuru sighed inwardly. Geez, you could at least tell me why. Ciel remained silent. Rimuru decided not to dwell on it. The more, the merrier. The moment Ciel fully materialized beside Rimuru, a shift in the air was almost palpable. Where Rimuru radiated an untamed, chaotic energy, her expressions lively, her movements fluid, Ciel was the opposite. Cold, calculating, her crimson eyes betraying no emotion. She stood still, not out of hesitation, but because she wasted no unnecessary movement. Even Westcott's usual smirk twitched slightly, as if something in the atmosphere had changed. Things just got interesting, he murmured. Then the fight resumed. Blades, light, and Beelzebub. The battlefield ignited in an instant. Rimuru vanished, reappearing midair with her katana slicing toward Westcott. He barely managed to react. Beelzebub conjured a black portal, blocking the strike with an almost eerie precision, but before he could counter. Boom! A blast of energy exploded from Ciel's outstretched palm, striking his defenses with pinpoint accuracy. Unlike Rimuru's attacks, which carried a degree of unpredictability, Ciel's movements were calculated to the decimal point. Every attack aimed at an exact weakness. Westcott gritted his teeth. TCH. You're the analytical type, huh? Ciel's eyes remained unreadable. Observation leads to inevitable conclusions. Then Artemisia struck. Her blade shimmered as she lunged at Rimuru from behind, her speed surpassing even Ellen's. But Rimuru, still airborne, twisted at the last second, her katana meeting Artemisia's weapon in a violent clash. Crack! The shockwave of their impact split the sky. Simultaneously, Ellen moved in, her own weapon humming with overwhelming Riryoku. Rimuru barely disengaged in time, shifting her momentum to counter Ellen's downward strike. The force of it sent a seismic wave across the ground, shattering stone beneath them. Ciel, unfazed, redirected a volley of Nibelcoal energy blasts with a flick of her fingers. Each attack sent the book pages spiraling into destruction, But no matter how many she eliminated, more replaced them. "How annoying," Seal muttered. Westcott, now moving in tandem with his allies, intensified his use of Beelzebub. Shadows stretched unnaturally, portals rippled in and out of existence, each one designed to counteract Rimuru's impossible speed. He was forcing her into a predictable rhythm, just when Westcott thought he had mapped out her movements. Everything stopped. No more impossible acceleration. No more erratic, unreadable movements. No more flickering between reality and nothingness. Rimuru stopped moving, and smirked. Westcott's pupils shrank. His instincts flared, warning him that something was very, very wrong. His mind, honed through countless battles and near-immortal existence, immediately calculated possible outcomes. She was baiting him, she was stalling, she was about to unleash something. But what? His fingers twitched. The abyssal power of Beelzebub surged at his command, ready to deploy an infinite array of countermeasures. He was prepared to adapt, to evolve, to dismantle whatever trick she had planned. But then Seal disappeared. No trace. No presence. No lingering energy signature. Westcott's breath hitched for a split second. His sharp gaze flicked to the battlefield, searching, analyzing. Seal had been fighting alongside Rimuru, seamlessly weaving between offense and defense, a living calculation of destruction. And now gone. What did she do? Rimuru lifted her katana. Then, with an almost casual elegance, she drove it straight into the ground. A deep, resonant crack tore through the battlefield as the blade embedded itself into the earth. Westcott's unease grew. His lips parted as if to say something, but then she looked straight at him. A slow, deliberate grin stretched across her lips. "Did you really think I was just running around dodging your attacks?" Her voice was smooth, almost mocking. A single sentence, yet the way she spoke it sent a visceral chill down Ellen and Artemisia's spines. Even the mindless Nibelcoal, attuned to their master's will, flickered erratically as if sensing a disruption in the natural order. The battlefield, once filled with deafening explosions, violent clashes, and the relentless hum of Riryoku and magic, fell silent. A pause. A stillness that was more terrifying than any attack. And then Westcott's smirk, so practiced, so confident, faltered. Just slightly. Then her right leg began to glow. Riryoku. The concentrated, boundless energy of existence itself erupted around her limb in a dazzling cascade of power. But this time something else mixed with it. Something darker. Something ancient. Something wrong. Westcott's breath hitched as he felt the change before he could comprehend it. The air around Rimuru twisted, warping under an invisible force, bending in ways that should not be possible. Nihility. The antithesis of existence. An energy that defied not only the natural laws of this world but the very foundation of reality itself. It did not simply radiate from her, it eroded, dissolved. The space surrounding her foot trembled, unable to decide whether to exist or to cease altogether. The pressure increased. A feeling that did not belong in this world descended. Artemisia staggered back. Her breathing hitched. Her hands trembled slightly, an unfamiliar sensation for the Sword Saint. She had fought many enemies, she had faced insurmountable odds. But this wasn't power. This was something beyond power. Ellen's mind screamed at her to react, to strike, to move, but her body refused. Even her advanced perception, her calculated analysis, her finely tuned instincts, all useless. A battle she could measure, she could counter. A battle she could define, she could understand. But this was an unknown. Westcott gritted his teeth. His fingers twitched, forming the sigils for an immediate reactionary spell. Beelzebub surged at his command, but it was already too late. She stomped. Purses. The world fractured. A single moment, a single step. And the earth itself tore apart. The battlefield did not simply shake. It broke. A massive chunk of the land ripped clean from the planet's surface. As if the laws of physics, the concept of gravity, the fundamental truths of the world ceased to matter. Westcott and his entire team flung violently into the sky. High velocity. Terminal acceleration. No control. Their bodies, their defenses completely unprepared for such an overwhelming and unnatural shift. Ellen's scream was drowned out by the howling wind. Artemisia twisted in the air. her grip tightening on her sword as she tried to reorient herself. Westcott, for all his experience, for all his calculated planning, for all his prepared contingencies, was caught off guard. The sky swallowed them whole. A moment of stunned silence, and then a single voice cut through the chaos. Rimuru. She stood on the newly created cliff's edge, looking up at the airborne figures, her golden eyes shimmering with unrestrained amusement. Her smirk widened. Now then. Her right leg crackled with power once more. Let's see how you handle this. End. Chapter 43.